We are. We're live. Hi. Welcome to True Faith Presents The Charlotte Show with me, Charlotte, but most importantly with Keith Gillespie. Thank you, Keith, for joining us this evening.
No worries.
Thanks and thank you, Mark, for all. Mark's
Pleasure.
Also here.
I'll make up the numbers.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Keith should be in the middle. I don't know how to make that happen. Hang on. There we go. Live swap like that. So it's been a weird time to be a Newcastle fan. We had a really good game against Everton. I know, Keith, that you watch a lot of the football, so I'm sure that you saw that we had a really positive performance. I think you said in our group that it was the best performance you'd seen all season. Were you really positive going into the Palace game after that? Did you feel really excited?
Not too excited. I think one thing about Newcastle that we've realised this season, that when they actually do get a good result, they don't back it up with another one. They've done that a few times this season. The performance in the second half was pretty good against Leeds as well, you could say. But I mean, the Everton was the best performance of the season. I think if you look at Callum Wilson scoring 2 goals and he could add 5. Because he hit the crossbar, hit the post, and then he probably missed his easiest chance when he put it wide. So, that's something that we haven't really seen of Newcastle this season, is creating that many chances in one game. And they're playing against a side who are flying high, going for the top 4. So they've done the double over them. So it's been 2 decent performances against them, and then when you go 1-0 up early doors against Crystal Palace, you think, right, here we go, and then unfortunately we end up losing the game. But as I say, that's just been Newcastle. There's no consistency there whatsoever, and it'd be great if we could see the performances that they had against Everton on a more regular basis. But it's few and far between.
I think the thing that got me was that you're right. We've had this weird inconsistency thing, like good game, bad game, bad game, bad game, okay game, bad game, bad game. And then, but the performance against Everton it didn't just feel as fluky. It felt like people were way more organised. It felt like players were in the right position. And that's what got me excited about the Palace game.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think when you sort of look back to the first game this season, West Ham, it had the same sort of feel to it, because I thought, apart from Everton, way the performance at West Ham, give us a little bit of false hope, being the first game of the season and performing so well. And it has been very topsy-turvy, but certainly in terms of, as I say, chances created. And that's probably without, your most effective player on the pitch at times, with St. Maximum. So there is a little bit of hope there that he comes back and they do start creating more chances, because the majority of games this season, we haven't created enough. That's very obvious, but it was a really good performance against a decent Everton side who then go to Leeds and beat Leeds away the other day. So I think we all know it's sort of a strange season where teams are just beating each other.
And Mark, what about you? Do you think that it was more of a fluke now, the Everton result, or is it still a maybe?
I don't know. That was like a totally different team, wasn't it? The way we lined up, the way we seemed to just be so proactive in everything we were doing. That was the most enjoyable game for a long time for me, the Everton game. And as Keith mentioned there, Wilson could have scored 5 easily, and it was brilliant just to watch. A 10 out of 10 performance from a striker who, Newcastle love our strikers, but he just seems to get better and better. And I absolutely love him as a footballer. He's everything you want from your striker. But yeah, when you think about what happened on against Palace, it was such a come down, wasn't it? But it's interesting though that I celebrated the goals against Everton and Palace, a lot more than I have for a long time. So I don't know whether the change in formation. The players just seem to have a lot more hunger about themselves. And obviously there's Jones who's come in. I'm sure we'll touch on him, but it's interesting that it would just look a totally different team, and they look confident. And I'd like to think that perhaps Tuesday may be a fluke, and hopefully we'll get back to how we were last Saturday tomorrow. And that's totally went full circle for me, because a week ago I had it down as relegation. So
yeah. Well, yeah, the relegation thing I think is still a question mark over our season. We're not safe yet. There's, looking over our shoulder at Fulham a little bit. But I want to ask you that, Keith. I guess Mark's brought up Jones. I wanted to ask you how much I don't know if you've ever experienced it where midway through a season a new coach has brought in with sort of crazy fanfare that Newcastle brought him in with. But have you ever experienced that? And then B, I suppose, even if not, what kind of how G'd up would that make the team? How might that change things? Do you really think it might?
Yeah, well, we had it back sort of 95, 96 when Mark Lawrenson came in to sort of help with the defence, and it went a bit pear-shaped from then. We went a bit.
I'm glad you said that.
I mean, that's nothing, against Mark Lawrenson, because he was good, really good coach and a good guy, but it just never worked out for us. But I think in terms of somebody like Graham Jones coming in, the fact of the matter is the level that he's been working at, the players that he's been working with, especially with Belgium, with Roberto Martinez, you're working with people like De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, Lukaku, some big names. We know how good the team is, the Belgium team is. So I think he's obviously done his sort of apprenticeship in terms of under Martinez, and coming to a big club at Newcastle, he'll want to make an impact, because he'll obviously know that they've had their struggles this season. And if already, I think because the performances in the two games have been better, people are sort of linking that. Is it because Jones has come in? So he will want this, stamp his authority on things. Although obviously he's not the boss, but he'd want to sort of maybe prove that is the case, that there is a lot more sort of organisation, because sometimes we don't really see that at times, because we've sort of been questioning at times the players on the pitch and the level of sort of what they've been told to do. Hopefully we've now got a guy in who, they'll listen to, they'll take things on board and go out in the pitch and show that.
I did think it was really interesting against Palace that because there had been a lot of people saying, Jones is already making his impression. I don't know if you saw, Keith, but Graham Jones was in the stands for a lot of the first half of the match against Palace, and then apparently came down to the dugout after they scored their first goal. Do you think, and you don't have to answer if I'm just baiting you, do you think that was like a power move from Steve Bruce to be like, I am still in charge of this team? Or do you think he just wanted that higher view onto the...
Yeah, I mean, it's totally different now, because, you're up in a stand there, and it's not like you're surrounded by people, and you can see a lot more things. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I think... as far as like first team, coaches, assistant manager, whatever they are, they'll always be in the dugout, most of the time. If there's a crowd there, they'll be sitting in the dugout, because, the manager needs them. The manager needs people to look after him as well, and to have his back. And it's important you build that relationship up with him. And I don't know in terms of what the relationship and how well they knew each other before the appointment, but if there wasn't a prior relationship, they'll want to get a good relationship as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have had a couple of questions come in. I think there's we could just talk about it all day. I probably am reading too much into it, because I'm just want Newcastle United should be enough of a soap opera as is, but I'm like putting in extra soap opera storylines. Alex Hurst, our good friend, says, question for Keith: were you ever swapped sides as a winger in your career? Ryan Fraser clearly wants to play left wing, but has to move when ASM comes on. How would you feel in his shoes?
Well, I never really had much of a left foot, so that wasn't really an option. My game was more taking players on the outside and getting crosses in, so I wouldn't be sort of as effective on the left. I know you do have the option of cutting inside and when you're on the left and scoring with your right, but I think, when I was playing, we had proper centre forwards in the middle who wanted crosses. So, there would be no need for me to be on the left. We had Ginola there. I understand that, you want to play, your position, what your favourite position is. But I think in terms of, the way football is, if you can sort of play a few positions, it can help you as well, because you can get a place in a team where other times you wouldn't. The fact of the matter is, the Maximum is the number one left-sided player in terms of between him and Ryan Fraser. But with Fraser, if Fraser knows that, at least he knows that then he has the option of playing on the right-hand side as well. And all you want to do is play. So for me, it doesn't really matter where you play. You want to play in your strongest position, but I think at the end of the day, as long as you're playing, I don't think there's anything to complain about then.
Yeah, and Danielle, it's Daniel. I know it's Daniel. Oh, so this guy watched the show the other day, and there was somebody else commenting who had his same name, and he kept getting confused and being like, I can't believe there's somebody else called Daniel Marshall. So he just put an A on the end of his name today. Anyway, he was going to ask if KG18 was asked to play anywhere other than right wing by Keegan. Most of that team had tactically versatile players. It's a similar sort of question, I guess.
I think there was an occasion I played wing back, but that was us being really ultra forward thinking, because Ginola played left wing back and I played right wing back. So that's what you call wanting to play as many forward players on the pitch as possible. And we were 3-2 down against Ferencváros in the UEFA Cup, and we ended up winning 4-0. And then the following Sunday it was, we played the same formation, myself and Ginola, and we beat Middlesbrough at home 3-1. And then I don't think we played it again, which was quite strange. But that was probably the only time. Under Kenny, I played centre forward on a couple of occasions, but that was due to nobody else being fit at the time. We had Tino was out, Alan Shearer was out, even Ian Rush was out, so I ended up having to fill in there. So that's the only time. And throughout my career, I've later in my career I have played right back a few times at Sheffield United. I've even played right back for Northern Ireland at times. So it's something, in terms of being a winger and you learn the defensive side of things. Being a right back isn't so much different as being a winger at times, because there is so much work to do as a winger, and you end up in the right back position so much. So it was quite easy, to have that sort of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I want to ask why you were laughing so much there. You absolutely creased at that.
It just epitomizes Kevin Keegan, doesn't it? He played Keith Gillespie and David Ginola as wing backs. I mean, it's just wishful thinking to go back to them days. But Keegan would have played Pavel up front if he could. You know what I mean? That's the way he was like. But it's interesting that Keith mentioned the Dalglish, because that instantly brings me back to Keith when he told a good story about was it Blackburn when you all your mates were over or something. They put a bet.
Yeah.
Did they forget to put a bet on you to score first goal or something like that?
No, I told them I was playing centre forward, so they thought they'd have a few quid on me for first goal, and I scored the first goal. We drew the game 1 each, but I came in the players' lounge afterwards, and I thought I would see happy faces. And those football coupons where you put the wee sort of X in, they'd actually put it in the wrong box by mistake, and it was the box below. They'd backed Des Hamilton by mistake instead of me.
That's amazing. Amazing. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, question for Keith. This is from Chris Curry. Are our players struggling to read Wilson's movements, hence lack of crosses? How would Keith play to Callum Wilson's strengths as a winger? That's an interesting question, because I suppose my immediate response is no, we're just shit in midfield and we're just not getting the ball up that way. But maybe what do you think?
Yeah, I think if you look at games, the amount of possession we have is quite minimal at times. So if you're not going to have a lot of the ball, when you do have it, you've got to make the most of it, and you've got to get decent service up to your striker. We know how good Wilson is in terms of holding the ball up and bringing players into play, and he wins a lot of free kicks at times. He's a very clever player, very strong. You get balls in the box, you'll get on the end of them. But I think it all comes back to, in terms of how often we have the ball. It's a bit different from when I played, with strikers that I had, because, you could sort of probably argue that we had the majority of possession, especially when you're at home. We would have had the majority of possession no matter who we were playing. Whereas you look at games this season, and no matter who, Newcastle are playing, be it home, be it away, they tend to have very little possession. One of the lowest sort of stats probably in the league. I think probably them and Crystal Palace probably have the least in terms of possession this season, and I think it's the first I've sort of seen in a while. I might be wrong that they maybe had more possession than Crystal Palace did the other night.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's something that we're not used to. But I think it doesn't help when you're changing a lot of midfield at time, and players. 1 week Matty Longstaff play, then Sean Longstaff, then Shelby, then you got Hayden, you've got Hendrick, Joe Linton up there, Andy Carroll sometimes. So there's never ever a settled side either, and he is still new to the club in terms of he's been there 6-7 months, and I think he's been arguably Newcastle's best player, and you sort of wonder where they would be without him. His goals, would be really struggling. So hopefully, I know there's a bit to go. Get this season out of the way, and get somebody in who will complement somebody like Callum Wilson, somebody that he'll enjoy playing with, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think Ryan Fraser is that to a degree, because they obviously have that relationship since Bournemouth. But I don't know. I'm still in my head the jury's still out on Ryan Fraser, because he hasn't had much game time. He's had a bit, and he has shown some promise. I don't know if you agree or disagree, Mark.
Fraser, yeah, the jury's definitely out. It's just a shame that he's come back to fitness, and he had that stupid sending off against Sheffield United, didn't he? And it's just sort of, it tarnished him in a way, because we needed the players more than anything that night. And the fact that we got beat off a team that hadn't won all season, the players didn't perform. The fact that he got sent off, it just sort of a big black mark against him, unfortunately. I think Keith's made a good point there. This season we're probably wanting to end now, so we don't get dragged on that relegation zone. And then we're going to have to kick on. But again, I would still like to kick on with a different manager. That's not going to change because we beat Everton last week. We've just got to hope that the likes of Fraser can complement Wilson in the Premier League next season, and hopefully with a different manager.
Yeah. Your video, I don't know if it's the same for everyone else. Your video is slightly after your voice, so I'm never sure if you've actually stopped speaking. Sorry, I'm just trying. It's fine. Slothy Vlogs, which is Davey, says, "Can Keith not take the final squad players over Atsu?" This is today's news that we got we had one squad place available after God, now I've forgotten the name of who did we get rid of, Mark?
Who's left?
No, we got rid of somebody, so we had a squad place open. God, I can't remember. That's terrible.
Oh, Yedlin got sold.
Oh, yeah, of course he went to Galatasaray. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Atsu's back in the squad, and apparently he said, apparently Steve Bruce said today, like, well, it was between him and Saive, so it wasn't a hard choice, which is really funny. And kind of leads into, obviously, it would be great if you could come back, Keith, but I don't think that's. It kind of ties into a question Alex asked here, which is, a lot of NUFC fans get frustrated with the manager's press conferences. Do players, in your experience, take any notice of what the manager says to the press? Because it's also interesting. I was going to say it when you were talking about ASM a little bit earlier on, that when he's been out and Steve Bruce has said to the press, well, it's difficult when you're missing the only creative player you've got. And I was like, if I was the rest of them, I'd be like, oh man, I'm trying. Do you pay attention?
Not really.
Okay.
I think they speak to the press that often. I mean, back when I came to Newcastle, you can have the press there every day of the week at times. I don't know if it's now where they have designated days or whatever, but I think one thing that you got, especially Kevin Keegan, he always said the right things, and that's why the Newcastle people loved him, because you knew whatever he was saying was the truth, and obviously for the benefit of Newcastle, who he loved. He wanted the best for them, so he never really took that much notice, what he said. You'd read various things in newspapers and stuff, but that was it. I mean, I think it's a little bit, more so now where they have these big press conferences before games. They, back sort of, in the 90s, it was one of them where they just had the manager standing there, and all the press were standing around him with their sort of dictaphones, and that's the way it was. Outside even, so they went on quite a bit, the press conferences back then. So it was one of those, you just, you seen it little bits, but you never really took that much in. As long as you were playing in the team, it didn't really matter. You knew, especially with the likes of Kevin Keegan, he wasn't going to, badmouth you to the press, on an individual basis, any of the players or anything like that. That was all sort of done, in the dressing room if it had to be done, and that's the right way to be. But I wouldn't have taken much interest in what was said in the press.
I guess it is really different for you, particularly in your Newcastle years, because the manager was Kevin Keegan and not Steve Bruce, and he didn't just drop clangers every single press conference that he did. And also, like you say, people had dictaphones. There was no Twitter. There was no repeating of the quotes. Like I'll get, if Steve Bruce says something stupid, which is very regularly, I will get a screenshot of it sent to me by several different people, and it's just making the rounds. So it's I guess it's so different now to then. What else have we got coming in? Joseph Gardner, this is a new-ish fan of the podcast who lives in Oregon, and he says, just looked at what KG is up to professionally, and he's still playing after a break. Thanks for giving us hope we can still play sports as we age. I just want to be clear that Keith is has been a professional athlete. I don't know if you can just keep playing. You should be careful with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are currently playing.
Yes, I play for a newly formed team over here, which was set up to help a lot of people with mental health, and we're linked to the mental health charity. So we've had a lot of sort of ons and offs this season with obviously COVID and the club's newly formed, so we haven't actually played that often. We've only had about 6 league games, so And I play sort of centre midfield, a holding centre midfield role. So I retired 7 years ago and then made a comeback because I was asked to. So I think it's great in terms of on a Saturday afternoon you can sort of get the boots back on and enjoy things. It's difficult because we're quite an aging side. A lot of players coming back from retiring, and we play games where our average age is like 38 and we're playing against a team with an average age of 24, so that makes it difficult. But we're unbeaten, we're enjoying it. Big Roy Carroll was playing for us until last week he signed and is playing back in the Irish League again at 43, so wow. That's great to see. But in terms of what we're trying to do is a lot obviously to do with the mental health side of things, and just get more recognition out there in terms of the mental health and just everyday life.
That's amazing and really timely with COVID and people feeling on their own and everything. I mean, my day job is HR, and we have a real push on health and well-being at the moment because it's so difficult, everybody being disconnected and being on their own. So that's really timely. How did you get involved with it?
I'm involved in the sort of football agency business, so I'm a partner in that. Him and a friend just came up with a flippant comment one night, and then just all of a sudden things just took off. And the team was, pretty much formed over Zoom, during the first lockdown.
Oh wow!
We had sort of great press in terms of when we did, come out and say we were having a team, and we had Sky Sports there, and all the relevant people. So it was great that we could get that. And as I say, we're linked to a mental health charity. We raise a lot of money as well for that side of things, and we've got an online shop already. We've got big plans to have our own stadium. Plans to have a women's team as well, a reserve side. So it's a great sort of project, to be involved in, and something that's very worthwhile.
And you've got an online shop, so does that mean Mark can buy a big new poster of you to put up in his bedroom?
I don't honestly know in terms of what is, you get obviously the shirt and all that. We're called FC Mindwell.
Okay.
So that was the name that was sort of come up with, obviously, mind and well-being. So we combined the two. So, there's an online shop where you can buy, the kit, and a lot of the boys have bought the kit for their kids and all. And so we're very pleased with how things are going, and we obviously want to keep building it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's FC Mindwell for people watching who want to Google and have a look at what Keith and others are up to. That's brilliant. Mark, did you have a poster of Keith in your room when you were younger? Or
no, I've got to admit, when Keith signed, I was nightclubbing by then, man. I didn't have posters of Pablo Anderson on my wall, not Keith Gillespie. So sorry, Keith. But then again, though, I'm still finding some gems, obviously, that we're sharing in the group chat. Some gems of Keith. He's just a Bain, isn't he? You know what I mean when you think about it. But a quick one is, just going back to Keegan, if you don't mind, Keith. Were you aware when you signed how much Keegan had to explain himself to the supporters on them steps? Did you know anything about that when you signed?
No. That actual night, I actually stayed at Freddie Fletcher's house because they didn't want me going to the Gosford Park Hotel because they knew the press would be there, so they were just sort of keeping me sort of shielded from that. So I didn't know anything about that until I seen it. And we've spoken about this before on the podcast and what have you, about he's the only manager that would do that, would go out and speak to supporters like that, and I think if you look at it, some of them are quite irate at times, but by the end of it, they just trust in him. He says, "You've got to trust me in this." And you look at what he did then in terms of getting rid of Andy, brings Les in, then brings Shearer in. So I think they were right to trust him.
Yeah. Oh man, every time we talk, I'm like, oh man.
Sorry.
Apparently Hayden said in the Chronicle today that he wants us to play a consistent team / formation for the rest of the season. It sounds like players are frustrated with Bruce changing formation 999,999 times this season. That would frustrate you. I'm sure that we have talked a little bit about it, Keith, about how you were so able to create those partnerships on the pitch because you knew who you were playing with week in, week out, and how, I mean, we talked about it in the context of Lewis, I think last time we spoke about how he really hasn't had that chance. We've seen a little bit of what he can do, I think, in the last couple of matches, and he's really impressed me, actually, and I had kind of written him off, which is unfair of me. But yes, I imagine that from a player's point of view, it would be very frustrating.
Yeah, I think obviously, there's certain games where you might want to tinker with the formation, depending who you're playing against. But the majority of times, you should be sort of sticking to the formation which suits you best, which the players are used to. And that was the beauty of when I played at Newcastle with Kevin Keegan, because we knew it was 4-4-2. We never ever. I know I mentioned a 3-5-2 on a couple of occasions that time when we played wing backs, but predominantly we were 4-4-2 because that was our strength. Our strength was wanting to get the ball wide, wanting to get players in the box, and you sort of think about it in terms of players that played. We had a pretty settled side as well. If everyone was fit, you sort of knew what the side would be. Whereas I think with Newcastle at the minute, you don't know that. You don't know who's going to play centre half. You don't know who's going to play centre midfield. You don't know who's going to play full back. So that can come into it. But certainly, yes, you want players to get used to formations, the same formation. If you play the same formation, you get better and better at it. All this sort of tinkering with it, the players are going to, struggle from one week to the next.
And do you think the tinkering of it, with it, and again, I'm probably being really harsh here, is an indication that Steve Bruce doesn't really know what to do with the players that he's got? Or or what else? Like, why does it change so much?
Yeah, I've said this before. I don't think that it's a great squad. I don't think it's a great squad of players to sort of pick from, and that's why you never see the same sort of team. Week in, week out. There's always changes because they need better players. That's the way things are. I think we're quite fortunate in that there is a few teams worse than us, but we're down where we are in the league because we deserve to be there. There hasn't been enough sort of performances this season, like the Everton one or like the West Ham one. It's been very mediocre at best at times. So if you haven't got a good squad, you are going to struggle, and you are going to chop and change at times because there's just not that quality in the squad.
I hadn't really considered it from that perspective because I'm very quick to just blame Steve Bruce, apparently, but that's a good point. I think that there is some quality in there, but it needs so much micromanaging and so much like forensic looking at that we don't either have the capacity to do or the want to do or the ability or mixed in the coaching staff. So yeah, I suppose it does have, the squad has to play. And if you're watching and you agree or disagree, let me know. We had another question. There's a couple of good questions. I'll ask this one. Someone from the Shetlands has asked a question as well, which is a very broad one, but I will come to it. Danielle says, another Q for KG18. I hope you like being called that. In his opinion, you were one of the few players from Keegan's team that were sold too soon and actually seemed to peak just after Keegan left. Which season does Keith think is his peak season? Before you answer, Keith, I'm going to see what Mark thinks is your peak season and see if it matches.
I've said this before, but I think Keith's contribution towards that 95-96 season is very, very underrated or underestimated. You know, being the nerd that I am, I worked out the assists, I worked out the goals, how much Keith was involved with all the goals, and he surpassed Ginola, and Ginola got all the plaudits. You know, it's not a small matter that Kevin Keegan turns around to Peter Beardsley, who again is one of the best footballers. In fact, he is the best footballer I've ever seen. No offense, Keith, but
Untaken.
Kevin Keegan turned around to Peter Beardsley and said that Peter Beardsley was playing with the best footballer in the country at that particular time, and that was Keith Gillespie. So, you know, you can't underestimate Keith's influence for that side. You mentioned the 4-4-2, proper wingers, getting past the defenders, crossing the ball in, big Les up front, absolutely fantastic. Or Rob Lee and Peter Beardsley coming in to sweep up the second ball. So for me, Keith's best form was definitely the start of the 95-96 season before Phil Neville took them out, and I'll never forgive him for that, because after Phil Neville did that, the team didn't look the same. Keegan sort of toyed with the idea of bringing Keith back in, but the balance of the side was gone. You know, and I love Peter Beardsley, but to play Peter Beardsley right wing or right midfield, it just wasn't the right move. But yes, I think the following season, after Keegan had gone, you know, and Kenny come in, apart from getting sent off, Keith did really well towards the back end of that season. So I think it was Arsenal he got sent off, didn't you, mate?
Yeah, Arsenal. Remember it
but
well.
Yeah, to answer the question, for me, Keith's peak of his whole career was the first 6 months of 95-96. And I don't know whether Keith agrees, but that's my own view.
Yeah, what do you think, Keith? Was that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think when you sort of just look back and you look at the football that we played, you know, it must have been a sort of dream for a Newcastle fan to be going to St James's every week, because we weren't scared of anyone. And I know we lost one game that season and drew one, and we won 17. You know, so 17 out of 19 wins in the league, and losing, you know, the one probably which was a real changer, the game changer of the season, was the one that we lost against United when arguably we deserved to win. And then the one we drew was last day of the season when, you know, we needed a miracle anyway to win the league. So yeah, that season was just incredible to be a part of. And you know, the players, you know, you look at I think Ginola came third in the Players Player of the Year. Les won it. You know, you got two players in the top three there. You know, you look at people like Rob Lee's contribution, Peter Beardsley's contribution. You know, our fullbacks were brilliant as well because they loved attacking. You know, so it was just a joy to play on a team like that. So, you know, without a doubt for me, you know, definitely either the 95-96, and I know you know, the best game I obviously played was the Barcelona game, which was 97, but that was probably, you know, a rarity that season. I wasn't obviously performing like that every week. You know, whereas 95-96, I was sort of, you know, at the top of my game, especially for those first 6 months before I did get injured.
Okay, it's interesting that Danielle thinks that you seem to peak after Keegan left then. I'd be interested in a bit more context, Danielle, if you're still watching. Rafa Benitez's God says, as a great crosser, Keith, who do you rate as the best crosser in Premier League history? Beckham, Gerrard, De Bruyne, someone else?
Yeah, gosh, some great names there. Beckham was, you know, obviously it wasn't, you know, we're not even talking about proper wingers here. None of them are wingers. You know, I know Beckham played on the right side, but his position was a centre midfielder. And obviously De Bruyne and Gerrard are centre midfielders. So, It's such a difficult one because, you know, for me it's probably between Beckham and De Bruyne. De Bruyne, you know, when that one sort of set back to him, the amount of times he puts that in the right area, and obviously I know from playing with Beckham when I was younger how good, you know, he is. Especially, I'd say more Beckham was probably a better set piece taker in terms of free kicks, and his delivery that way. Whereas I'd probably say De Bruyne is probably the best in terms of a moving ball, a rolling ball back to him where he just whips it in. You know, he's had countless assists over the years, and you know, I think, you know, he's still very young. You know what he's sort of achieved in terms of the assists that he's got in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that you would add to that, Mark?
Apart from Keith Gillespie, no. The thing is now with football is the players that I mentioned there, they're not players who would get down the wing, down the byline and whip one back. It's a totally different game now.
Yeah.
So as fantastic as they all are, it's a different game. One player who just jumped to mind there, some of the older people remember a lad called Franz Carr who played for us well before Keith signed. And he was very tricky. He was very pacey. He would get to the byline and he would just hit the Gallagher end every single time. He just couldn't cut it back, and he was one of the most frustrating wingers I've ever watched because he had the ability, but he just couldn't cross a ball. So that just instantly jumped back in my mind. So thank God, Franz Carr was replaced with Rob Lee, and then Keith eventually. So good times.
Okay, I'm going to ask the chap from the Shetlands. What did he write? There's a couple of questions actually on modern day wingers, or one question on modern day wingers that I would like to ask. But this is a really broad question, but it's interesting if there's one thing that sticks out. So hello, Keith Lee from Shetland. What was your favourite memory of being a footballer? Sorry if the question's already been asked. It hasn't been asked, Lee, so you're fine. Favorite memory? Well, you are still a footballer, so
yeah.
So,
I think just when you sort of look back and you sort of think about the thousands of kids who wanted to be footballers, you know, there was an era, you know, everyone was growing up wanted to be pop stars. Then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to be footballers, you know, and just getting up and going out and doing your job, you know, training every day, you know, getting paid to, you know, to do your hobby, really. You know, you sort of look back and feel very thankful of, you know, for that, you know, that you aren't sort of having to sort of get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and, you know, go to work, you know, wherever it is, whereas you're going onto a football pitch and you're kicking a ball about, you know, so I think that is, you know, the favourite thing. You know, you have other favourite things as well, you know, being in the dressing room and the banter you get around the dressing room and the camaraderie and stuff like that. And that is one thing you always do miss when you come away from football. So it's great that I've sort of been involved in back in a dressing room sort of scenario again, you know, and having that sort of banter. But I think definitely in terms of, you know, being a professional footballer, getting paid for a job that, you know, is practically a hobby for you.
Well, Davey says the ladies, Keith. were all the ladies not the favourite memory?
Oh, right. Julie's maybe.
Oh my God, I used to go to Julie's too on the quayside. It was
my second home.
Terrible place. Used to have like cages, and I'd dance in the cage. Oh my God, a long time ago. Let's have a little look at what else we've got. That was a very lovely and wholesome answer, by the way, and I've just totally ruined it by being like, what about the women? Sorry. So we'll go back to the game. What are Keith's thoughts on modern day wingers' reluctance to take on fullbacks and the outside, instead recycling the ball backwards? See a lot of backwards balls in Newcastle's style of play at the moment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough wingers in the game today, and that's down to formation. I think fullbacks, your fullbacks are your wingers now. You know, that's the way it is. You look at, you know, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. They're the ones who put the balls in the box for Liverpool. A lot of it's sort of getting out with Man United as well. Now you see when they scored their first goal the other night, it's Luke Shaw crossing it, and it's the right back who's Wan-Bissaka who's scoring. So they just don't play with wingers anymore. Teams don't play 4-4-2. And 4-4-2 was what most teams played. When I was, especially when I was at Newcastle, you're playing against clubs, and you just match each other up. Sometimes you'd obviously get clubs, coming to St James's and they play 4-5-1 and try and make things difficult for you. But if you've got enough quality in the pitch, you can deal with that. And as I say, I just think there's a lack of wingers in the game now. I think probably Raheem Sterling was a winger, but you don't sort of see him, predict or going on the outside very often. He sort of runs inside and plays on that left hand side. So yeah, it is disappointing because I think in terms of what fans love to see was 4-4-2. Yeah. And again, I'll go back to the strikers that we had. You got two big strikers, Les and Alan. You have to play with wingers. That's just it'd just be absolutely crazy if you didn't. And you don't see sort of players now running, getting to the byline and sort of just lifting one up to the back post for a Shearer or Ferdinand coming in at the back post. That's just something you don't see an awful lot of. It's more intricate stuff and trying to play through the middle. So I don't know whether I'd get much of a game now in terms of playing. I'd have to sort of transform the game in some way. But I just loved it. I loved the wing play that was there, because that's what I knew just growing up, all about wing play. And I got so much joy out of trying to beat a defender and trying to just whip across in, and when you get that one that is right on the money and somebody comes in and heads it, it's an incredible feeling.
Do you think Callum Wilson would benefit from that kind of play? Because for me, I feel like he's quite dynamic, I think, as a player, but I also feel like he's a proper old school type centre forward. Do you think?
Yeah, he's certainly good in the air. His header against Everton was fantastic. You'd like to see our wingers, when there is wingers, then St Maximin a lot of times would maybe come inside as well. If he would go outside and whip crosses in, I've no doubt that Callum Wilson has got the right instincts to be in the right place. Strikers have that instinct. Good strikers, they are in the right place at the right time, and I think Callum Wilson is one of them. And certainly if we have wingers and you get them further up the pitch and they are whipping balls in, I've no doubt that he would get on the end of them. Yeah,
I agree. I think that header was excellent, and I also think you're right about the instinct and about the intelligence of like reading the game. Yeah. And not letting his head go. We've talked about that quite a lot recently on our podcast, that he stays really calm, or seems to, and even if we're losing, he's still taking in the game and not losing his head, which is really nice. And we've done almost 50 minutes, which is crazy. I think there's one other question, unless Mark, you want to jump in with anything.
No, I've just noticed Danielle Marshall's comment. I just want to sort of mention it because it's a key topic regarding Keith's contribution at Newcastle. Mentioned that if we put 97, 98 Keith Gillespie into 95-6 team for maximum impact, it's a great point, but I think maybe I would look at that from a point of view as Keith was probably one of the best players in that squad, in what team had sort of went backwards quite a lot, that perhaps Keith being one of the better players, it stood out a lot more, where in the 95-96 season under Kevin Keegan, everyone was on top of the game. So I don't know if that makes sense, but my own memory of that is Keith's form at Newcastle was certainly, when you think of what his key attributes were, which was his pace, taking on the defenders, and getting the ball in the box and chipping in with some goals. For me, it's got to be 95, 96.
Okay. Thank you for refuting it to like get in there.
Not a problem.
Let me see. Chris from Gallagher Shots says my favorite people on this podcast in order: Keith, Charlotte, and whoever that other lad is. He knows Mark. The question I wanted to ask, which I thought was interesting, and then I'm gonna make you both do a score prediction for tomorrow, and then I'm gonna let you have your Friday night back. Is from Julian, who says, Keith, are there any repeated myths and legends about manager halftime team talks that fans hold to be true but really aren't true? Mark, if you know of any, stick them in here. I don't know of any. Do halftime team talks / hair dryers actually have an impact?
I think there is sort of, people do talk about that, because they always talk about maybe Alex Ferguson with the hair dryer treatment, and we obviously know about the instance when he kicked the boot and it hit David Beckham. But you don't see managers going over the top too much. Certainly Kevin never did. Kevin's team talks before a game were the shortest team talks I've ever known. A couple of minutes long, which is great because as you got older in football, I think managers then thought that you had to have 30-40 minutes team talk, and sometimes you're falling asleep, so you are listening to it. So I think Kevin had the right idea. I think that if there is times where if things aren't going well in the first half, you are going to need a bit of a rollicking, and a manager is going to have to give you a good shout in that. And I think it's up to yourself, really. I mean, you know yourself when you come in at halftime whether you have performed well enough. There's times where you come in and you sort of think, I'm going to get it here. I know I'm going to get it because I haven't performed well enough. So I think if you do get it, you just have to accept it. And you then want to have that fight to go out and show what you can do in the second half. I was very lucky in terms of when I had my youth team manager at Man United. I had a guy, Eric Harrison, and the players loved him. He brought the class of '92 through, and Eric was incredible, but you would be so scared of him. We had our training ground, but Eric would watch the matches from it was at the Cliff training ground, and he had a big window, and he would never be outside, but if you heard the window banging, you sort of had this sort of wee look up, and then sometimes if you didn't see him, you knew he was on his way down to have a go at somebody at the touchline, and then he was gone again. So, but even then, there's times where he would have a go at you at half time. You could come in and you'd maybe set one up, scored two, and you have a real go at you. And looking back on that, when we sort of speak, a lot of the boys from that sort of team, it was a lot to do with sort of character building. You think you'd played well. There's other times where you'd been rubbish and you didn't get anything from him. Which it was all character building in terms of how you react to things, and that was great in terms of having that sort of manager growing up who praised you probably when you shouldn't get praised, and then had a go at you when you should have been getting praised. So he just wanted to see how you react to things. So I think I was very fortunate, being at a club like Man United and having somebody like that who knew how to, get the best out of us.
Quite psychologically taxing, though. To be like, oh, what have I done? I thought I had a good game and I'm being shouted at.
Yeah, exactly. I remember actually Ben Thorney from that youth team. He always talks about a game where we played. We used to play in the A League, it was called there, but we would have played against Tranmere Reserves, and we beat Tranmere Reserves 5-2. And Ben says I'd scored 2, set up 2, and I came in after the game, and the manager went through me, so he did. And you sort of at that time you're sort of thinking, wow, what have I done wrong? And then looking back and analysing it now, you sort of see the reasoning behind it. Just wanted to see your reaction, and I think that was the way he sort of was. He could maybe start out at the beginning of the week and go, right, it's his turn this week. The following week, right, it's his turn, just to get that reaction. So very, very, very clever.
Yeah, he sounds borderline psychotic to me.
Yeah, he was superb. But as I say, you were frightened to death of him.
Yeah, well, I guess he got results. So
yeah.
Okay, we've done 55 minutes. Mark, how are you feeling about tomorrow's game against Southampton? We absolutely need a win. They got an absolute pummeling earlier on in the week. How do you feel about it, and what do you think the score will be?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but we're going to win. We're going to win 2-0.
Oh.
I think, I'm very confident. Southampton, I think, have lost the last 4 in the league.
Yeah.
And we've won 1-13. What we've got to worry about?
Okay, so 2-0. I love that optimism. Keith, some optimism?
Yep, I'm going to go for 3-2, which is
Ooh.
how often do we score 3? But
nail-biting stuff, that.
I just, I think last time I was on, I predicted it as away at Crystal Palace. So I predicted 2-0 away at Crystal Palace. So let's hope I'm right again.
We've been on a bad run then.
Yeah.
And we weren't expecting anything. So, okay. Keith thinks it'll be 3-2. I'm going to go 2-1 to Newcastle. I'm also going for a win. So all 3 of us. Also, Davey says 2-1. So I'm in great company. Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you, Mark, for joining me this evening. Good night. I don't know what's wrong with me. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I'm supposed to say that. And if you really liked it, you should consider becoming a patron. It's £6 a month, and there's loads of additional podcasts that Keith's done with Mark. Yes, we have a fanzine out at the moment. That's Steve Bruce's face on a Jurassic Park cover. Yes, there's loads of podcasts Keith's done about his time at Newcastle. You've gone right through from negotiating with Fergie and then coming into the team. So they're brilliant listens and really interesting. So do consider that. Thank you again to both of you, and have great weekends.
Cheers.